It was my 5-year-old who introduced me to the book we read for the Wonder Box today, by which I mean we were at the library and she saw a book with a unicorn and a rainbow on the cover, so of course it had to be added to the stack to come home. When we read it, I had no idea what it was going to be about, but as I read, I quickly fell in love with the story. After we had finished, Olympia said to me unprompted, "We should read this book at church." Now in my head, I'm thinking, well, yes, obviously I agree. But I wondered why she thought so, and so I asked her that. And her answer was, because it's about sharing feelings. And church is a place where we talk about our feelings. Now internally, I did a little happy dance for this very clear faith formation win. But externally, I played it cool, simply saying, yeah, that's right. This would be a great book for church. But as we reread the story immediately, of course, I wondered about how many adults here would share the same sentiment. How many of you immediately equate church with the place where we talk about our feelings? And I also noticed in Nimbus's story something deeper going on. This was not just a story about talking about our feelings, though it is certainly that. This was a story about the experience of living with depression. Nimbus didn't know why she couldn't be sunny all the time. It seemed so easy for everyone else, the story says. She thought about talking to her new friend about it, but she didn't want to cast a shadow on the fun. These two lines describe so well what it can be like to live with mental illness in a world where mental illness is stigmatized, where it is seen as a liability, as a flaw to be fixed. When it seems like everyone else around you has it all together, knows how to be happy and enjoy life, while you are just immersed in the struggle. When it feels like you can't share your story with anyone for fear of judgment or of putting a damper on their day. We are taught by society that mental illness is not something we're supposed to talk about. It's a personal struggle, a private matter, to be discussed only behind closed doors, if at all. People with mental illness are seen so often as less than, as unreliable or incapable of life in this normal world. Our world passes judgment so quickly. And so it is true that mental illness is too often a no casserole disease, as Barbara Myers said in our Words for Reflection. We show up in droves when people are going through cancer treatment, but we shy away, or more often are not even invited in when they are dealing with something like depression or other mental illnesses. This stigma and sense of judgment is such a disservice to all of us, but especially those who are living with a mental illness. And it is deeply counter to our universalist belief that every person is worthy of love. We declare as Unitarian Universalists that all of who you are is welcome here, no matter what struggles you bring, that you are already holy and whole. People with mental illness are just as deserving of the love and care as anyone else in our community. This is so clear in our theology, and yet it is still so hard to get past the stigma, even in our Unitarian Universalist communities. We hesitate to talk about mental illness, to share our stories, to let people know that we are struggling. We don't want it to change anyone's opinion of us. So too often we struggle in silence, isolating ourselves and often exacerbating our challenges with that isolation, that sense that we must be the only one, that everyone else is all sunshine and rainbows. But the thing is, the statistics are actually very clear that mental illness is common. More than 1 in every 5 adults in the United States has a mental illness. 1 out of every 20 adults experience serious mental illness, and more than 1 in 15 experience a co-occurring mental illness and substance use disorder each year. That means, statistically speaking, if there are a little more than 100 of us in this gathering, that more than 20 people here have a mental illness. 5 have a serious mental illness, and 7 have a co-occurring substance use disorder. That's at least what the statistics say. We know statistics don't work quite like that. But anecdotally, I would almost guarantee that some of those numbers are even higher. So if any of those describe you, I want you to know that you are not alone. Statistics would say that in this very gathering, someone else is struggling with the same thing. Now, mental illness is very unique to each person, so you may not be struggling in exactly the same way, but you are absolutely not the only one. And one of my hopes is that this congregation can be a place where we can talk openly about these struggles, where we are able to share our journeys with mental illness with each other, trusting that those stories will be held with love and care, and knowing in our hearts that by sharing those stories, we will find ourselves to be less alone than we imagined. I am one of those more than 20% of adults who have a mental illness. And I hear in Nimbus's story such echoes of my own journey. I have struggled with anxiety since I was in middle school and gone through a couple periods that have been particularly rough, with almost daily panic attacks and lots of challenges with sleep. The first time I went through one of those periods, I didn't understand it very well. I tried to ignore it, just like Nimbus. I tried to push it down and bottle it up, and I certainly wanted to make sure that no one else noticed, that it didn't dampen anyone's day. Now, unsurprisingly, none of that worked very well. It was not until I started to face my anxiety, to get to know it, that I was able to get it under control. Which is why I love that description of Nimbus making friends with her cloud, because it seems like sometimes that's all you can do with mental illness, to try to make friends with it. There isn't a cure in the way there is for some other things. There are ways of managing symptoms, but it's not something that just goes away, that you can make go away. You have to get to know it, to understand that part of yourself, and to offer it compassion and care. I have made friends with my anxiety in various ways over the years. Chief being, I found a medication that helps keep it at a manageable level. I've also done a lot of therapy, and I've benefited from the care of family and friends, especially those who know the experience of anxiety themselves. I have at least 2 people who I know I can always call who will understand exactly how anxiety works, who really get it. They're not going to judge me for casting a shadow on their day or tell me to just stop worrying. Instead, they will say, I get it, and it's okay not to be okay. They will listen deeply to whatever it is I need to share and distract me, when I could just use some funny stories to shift my brain out of a downward spiral. Having people with whom I can openly talk with about my anxiety has been utterly transformative for me, and is part of why I feel so passionately that I want church to be a space where we can share these stories freely. I know that when I am able to remove the isolation piece of anxiety, it's like a release valve. It doesn't mean that it goes away entirely, but it seems to have so much less force when I don't try to shove it down or put on a mask and hold it all inside. So when we say you are beloved and you are welcome here, we mean even when we ask how you're doing and the answer is not okay. We mean that you are beloved and welcome here even when you are struggling, when the grip of mental illness is holding you fast. We mean that you are beloved and welcome here even when you need to take breaks or step away to keep yourself regulated. We mean that you are beloved and welcome here even when you don't have the emotional energy to show up, even when it takes all your energy just to get through the day. We mean that you are beloved and welcome here as your whole, holy self, however your brain chemistry might work. We mean that you are beloved and welcome here without your mask, just as you are. Last year, I started doing monthly caring circles, each on a different identity or life stage or circumstance. They've been an opportunity to gather with folks in the congregation who are going through the same thing, to seek and share support, to know, for each of the people who show up, to know that they are not the only one. I started holding these in large part because I know that there are so many people in this congregation who are silently struggling with similar things and doing it all on their own. And I desperately wanted to get people to connect, to have others to journey alongside in those struggles. So far, that much seems to have worked. We don't fix anything in these circles, but they have been so meaningful in breaking isolation, inviting folks who are going through the same thing to connect with one another. People don't leave changed, but they do leave feeling less alone. And this is my hope in talking about mental illness today as well. As Sam said, we must understand that just as much as a physical injury or sickness, a mental illness is an obstacle for us to overcome together, not alone. So I want you to know that I am always here to talk, that our pastoral care associates are always here for you, and that chances are there is someone else in this community that has gone through something similar before or is going through it alongside you right now. And I want you to know that we love you just as you are. In this beloved community, may we find the courage to share our stories, to be real about our struggles, to shed those masks that we wear to seem like we have it all together. May this be a place where we know that it's always okay not to be okay. And may we find here companions for the journey, knowing that even in the midst of the hardest moments of our lives, we are not alone. May it be so.